Chapter 11 of Zhang Henshui's Cause of Laughter. The bamboo war only attacks the heart and the whole world, but the good is defeated. The money demon can cause trouble and stay up all night. But when Master Shang Tyran and General Liu Qi came into the room, Feng Shi was missing. General Liu shouted, "Tyran, you are really unreasonable. If there is beauty, there will be beauty. If there is no beauty, why should you blame me?" Master Shang smiled and said nothing, but just opened his mouth towards the bathroom door. Yakin had already ran in and said with a smile, "My sister is young and a little shy. Please don't make trouble." After saying that, she walked into the bathroom. Feng Shi stood facing the mirror with his back on his back. Yakin stepped forward and grabbed her, and said with a smile, "Why hide it? They are all friends and relatives. If you want to see each other, let's meet each other. Can they still eat you?" As he said this, he tried his best to kill Feng Shi, pulled out. Feng Shi lowered her head and leaned against the wall, taking one step at a time until she reached the side of the copper bed. No matter what, she refused to move forward. When Yakin was talking in the bathroom, Liu and Shang's eyes had already shot into the bathroom door like two rays of lightning. When Feng Shi came out, General Liu's sweat ducts all over his body turned up, and he felt numb for a while. Unexpectedly, such a beautiful woman walked out of nowhere, and said to Yakin, with a smile on her face, "This is Mrs. Shang's fault. I'm really sorry that there is a guest here, but he didn't give us a letter first and let us come in confused." After saying that, he took a step forward and gave a half bow to Feng Shi. "What's your surname, this lady? We came here a little more recklessly, don't take offense." Feng Shi saw that she was so polite, so she felt embarrassed and ignored her, so she had to get rid of Yakin's hand, stood still, and bowed to General Liu. Return gift. Yakin stood among the three of them and introduced them one by one, and then everyone walked out of the room and sat in the inner living room. Feng Shi sat down next to Yakin, lowered her head, looked at the large patterns woven on the carpet, and bit her lower lip slightly with her upper teeth. Although she hated General Liu for being so old, she hated him even more for his slanted posture. A pair of ephedra eyes only looks at people, but people often say that the general is a high-ranking official. Even in Dagu lyrics, the term general is often sung. Although today's generals are not necessarily the same as those in ancient times, they must be high officials. So sitting aside, I couldn't help but peek at him. I thought to myself, although the name of a high official sounds nice to hear, at first glance, he is just an ordinary person. This is called being famous rather than meeting him. When she thought this, Yakin kept saying something here and there, just trying to lead Feng Shi to talk. After sitting together for half an hour, we all became more familiar with each other than when we first met. General Liu said, "What's the point of us sitting here? With 4 ready-made legs, let's play a small game, okay?" Both Master Shang and Yakin agreed at the same time. Feng Shi just pretended not to know and didn't ignore it. Yakin said, "Big sister, let's play for rounds, okay?" Feng Shi turned around, shook her head at Yakin, and said softly, "I don't know how." Yakin hasn't answered yet. General Liu smiled and said, "No, there are no ladies today who can't play cards. Come on, play for rounds. If Miss Shen doesn't come, she will think that we are rough people and can't get along." Feng Shi could only laugh, and said, "I don't dare to take what you said. Why not come?" Feng Shi said, "It's not that I won't come, because I don't know how to do this." General Liu said, "It doesn't matter if you don't know how. I'll ask 2 people to watch behind you and be your advisors. It doesn't matter whether you win or lose. You have a sister here to protect your bodyguard. Besides, we are just doing it for fun. Who cares about the money? Come on." While General Liu was talking, Commander Shang had already ordered his servants to arrange the scene. It was in the middle of the living room that tables and chairs were set up, and a rug was placed on the table. The mahjong cards were put down and the chips were distributed. Feng Shi sat aside and watched coldly, always silent. Once the scene was settled, Yakin smiled, reached out and took Feng Shi's arm and said, Come on. Everyone is waiting for you. Are you embarrassed not to come alone?" I thought that if I didn't come, I would be disrespectful to others, so I had to lower my head, put my hands on the edge of the table, and stood still, but didn't say anything. Yakin smiled and said, "Come on. The 2 of us drive to and from the bank. I'll give you a sum of capital first. If you lose, it's mine." When she said that, she took out a bunch of banknotes from her body and gave it to Feng Xi's pocket. After stuffing it inside, he said with a smile, "Then it's yours." Feng Shi felt that the wife's piece was so thick and soft that there probably wouldn't be much of it, but it was just a hindrance to her face, so she couldn't take it out to take a look. However, with this money, even if you lose, you can still resist for a while without being unable to end. Because of this, she raised her head and smiled and said, "My mother told me to sit down for a while and then go back. I can't delay for a long time." Yakin said, "Hey, such a big girl can't live without her mother. In my case, isn't it like being at your home? Why don't we just leave if we don't meet for a while?" "Don't say that again. If you say that again, I will get angry with you." Liu and Shang saw that she had no intention of refusing and seemed to be allowed to play cards. They had already sat down, stretched out their hands on the table, and shuffled the cards. General Liu smiled and said, "Miss Shen, come on, we're waiting." Yakin pressed her with her hand, pushed her to sit down on the chair, and then sat down under Feng Shi's hand. Because everyone was seated, Feng Shi couldn't sit here blankly, so he unconsciously reached out to the table with both hands and picked up the cards. Her opponent was none other than General Liu. As soon as she came on the stage, she took care of him as much as possible. The cards she played were all central cards. Feng Shi had the opportunity to take the cards at any time. As soon as she came on the stage, she tied 4 cards into rounds. From then on, luck only flourished. General Liu's hand was inversely proportional, and he didn't even draw a single card. There was a card in Feng Shi's hand. There were 8 bobbins in Feng Shi's hand, and there were only 5 loose cards. She thought, "I won a lot of money, so it doesn't matter if I sacrifice a little." Because he showed his courage, he only took away the 10,000 Xian ropes and grabbed the tubes, keeping them all. "I started by splitting a pair of 50,000 ropes, and then hit a pair of 8 ropes, thinking that people who were trying to get started might pay attention. But General Liu didn't hit wanzi or ropes. He only hit tubes. Feng Shi came down after eating 7, 8, 9, and touched a pair of 9 tubes. 1 tube was used as the head, and 3, 4, and 5 were used. 6 tubes, and a solitary whiteboard outside, waiting to eat, 2, 5, 4, and the tubes will be settled. General Liu specializes in playing pipes. He played a 7-cylinder card. Feng Shi was overjoyed and shouted, "Eat." Just as he was about to hit the whiteboard, Yakin shouted, "Touch. Come on, I have the bag in my hand, and I have told others that it is a pity that we can't get along with such a clear and smooth girl." General Liu glanced at her secretly, and saw a slight blush on her face. He couldn't help but smile. When it was time for him to play the cards, a 10,000 card came up. He took the 4, 5, 6 and 3 tubes without thinking, took out a 4-cylinder piece and punched it out. Feng Shi was afraid of being touched again, so she waited a moment, then quietly put out 5 or 6 tubes and ate them. Yakin said to General Liu, "Did you see that? 3 sets of tubes were dropped to the ground. Whoever wants to play the tubes should eat the buns." General Liu smiled and said, "She is fake, and she is determined not to make peace with the tubes. Ignore it. You know she wants to eat 4 or 7 tubes. Why do you still give her a 4Gian card to eat?" General Liu snorted, touched his head with his hand, and said, "This is because I lost my mind." While he was talking, it was time for General Liu to play cards again. He smiled and said, "I don't believe it. Are they really all the same? I can't bear to have this good hand of cards broken up. I'll keep it." As he said this, he pulled out a 5-tube card and held it in front of him. He put it, then pressed it with 2 fingers, pushed it from the table to Feng Shi, and said with a smile, "Do you want it?" Feng Shi saw that he was interested in playing the 4-barrel card, and now he even played 5 barrels. Obviously he let himself make a piece, and when his heart moved, the 2 dimples on his face moved, and he smiled and said, "It's really a piece." Then he spread the cards outward. General Liu shouted, "If you have nothing to say, eat the buns, eat the buns." Then he pushed his cards into the pile. After taking it, he took out the banknotes, counted some money and some scattered chips, and brought them to Feng Shi. Feng Shi smiled and said, "What are you busy with? Otherwise, people will suspect that I am a sarai." After saying this, everyone laughed. In the middle of the laughter, Feng Shi took the money. Mr. Shang kicked Yakin's leg under the table and kicked General Liu's legs. So the 3 people looked at each other and smiled. After 4 rounds of playing cards, Feng Shi had already won 3 to 400 yuan. She didn't know how big the cards were. I don't know how much a chip should be worth. Anyway, people just take it when they bring it. When they give money, they go out and give it after asking. Although I felt a bit bored when I asked, I was afraid that I would appear to be a small family, so I could only estimate. I couldn't help but screamed a few times in my heart, feeling ashamed. Fortunately, General Liu played his cards loosely today and allowed me to play a big deck of cards. If it hadn't been like this today, and I had just lost, where would I have gotten the money to pay the card bill? Playing the game quietly today, they finally took a big risk. Looking back at them who lost money, they were still smiling while playing cards. It turns out that wealthy people don't care much about money. Normally, people regard 10 or 8 yuan as being as important as a millstone. Today, when I compared it, I gained a lot of experience. After playing these 4 rounds of cards, Feng Shi couldn't think about it anymore. However, after winning so much money, it was hard to say this. But they sat motionless and continued to beat Feng Shi without asking for permission. After playing 4 more rounds, Feng Shi won another 100 yuan, but she was afraid that they would not give up. However, General Liu stood up, yawned and stretched, which was a sign of fatigue. As soon as everyone got up, an old woman had already handed over a fragrant handkerchief. After putting down the handkerchief, another maid respectfully brought a cup of tea to her hand. Feng Shi took a sip, and when she was about to put the teacup down, the maid took it with a smile. Just as he coughed and was about to spit, another footman rushed over and bent down to bring the spittoon to his feet. I thought that being a rich and wealthy person was such a blessing. Just being a guest here and having him take care of me occasionally made me feel so comfortable. Because she said to Yakin, "You are too polite. If you do this, it will be difficult for me to come in the future." Yakin said, "Don't be polite. I'm keeping you to eat today. It's the cook at home who makes do with it, but there's no one. Don't be offended when you go to the restaurant to order food." Feng Shi said with a smile, "You said you're not polite, but you're still polite after all." I secretly thought that it was probably the vegetables and rice that their family ate casually. At this time, Yakin gave in again and let her into the inner living room. This is a small, elegant room, with a small round table covered with dishes. 2 footmen in white clothes stood slanted on one side of the room, waiting to serve respectfully. Teacher Shang said that Feng Shi was a first-time guest and she must sit in the upper seat. General Liu was not humble, so he just sat down under Feng Shi. Commander Shang smiled at General Liu and sat down below. As soon as we sat down, the waiter in white brought a large bowl of braised shark's fin and placed it in the middle of the table. Feng Shi cursed and felt ashamed in her heart. It turned out that their family's simple meals were so good. General Liu took the cup and took a sip of wine. He didn't eat the meat dishes on the table, but only used his chopsticks to stir the plate of raw carrots and cucumbers. Yakin smiled and said, "General Liu wants to taste the same dishes as ours today. We have changed cooks today." General Liu said, "This cook is really difficult to hire. They are from the south and the north. I really changed a lot, and so far there is no suitable one." Master Shang said with a smile, "You are looking for a cook. You are really famous. Since you don't have a wife at home, and you don't live at home, why do you need a cook?" General Liu said, "I can't not eat at home, even if I have a meal." "What would you do if you don't need a cook and don't go out?" "Well, since our wife passed away, nothing has gone smoothly. At least, to say the least, what I spent and the loss due to no one to take care of the house was probably 70,000 to 80,000 yuans. Master Shang said, "According to my opinion, I'm afraid it's more than that. Since you no longer have a wife, where have you not gone? In Beijing, Tianjin, and Shanghai. Can you calculate the amount of money spent?" General Liu laughed when he heard about it. Feng Shi sat on it and listened to their conversation. They were talking about prosperous matters, but there was no way to get involved in the conversation. She just listened silently and ate a meal. General Liu just memorized the history of one meal. After dinner, Yakin led Feng Shi into the bathroom, and she went out. Feng Shi closed the door and quickly took out the banknotes she had on her body. She counted a few, and found that she had one more than 400 yuan. The amount of gambling capital that Yakin borrowed was 250 yuan. The stack of bills was rolled separately, but it was never mixed with the winning money, so the roll of bills was still kept separately. After taking a bath, she came out and handed the banknote back to Yakin and said, "Thank you for lending me the capital. It's time for me to pay it back." She held the hand holding the banknotes, pushed it outward, shook her head, and said, "It's a small thing. It's worth talking about." Feng Shi thought she was being humble at most, so she took it back. Unexpectedly, she thought it was stingy, and she couldn't help but blush, because she smiled and said, "No matter how much, no one borrows money and doesn't pay it back." Yakin said, "We can wait until next time when we play small cards." When Feng Shi saw more than 200 yuan, she thought it would be a good purchase, but she refused to take it, so she accepted it. He smiled and said, "That's fine." Then he put it in his bag again. Looking at his watch, Yin smiled and said, "Didn't sister say that the supply car will take me back?" "Excuse me, I have to leave, it's almost 9 o'clock. Yakin said, "What are you busy with? There is a car to take you back. It doesn't matter if it's a little later." Feng Shi said, "I'm just worried about my mother, otherwise it won't be a big deal if I sit here for a while. Besides, I'm familiar with you, and we'll see each other again in the future." Yakin said, "Dao, if you say so, I won't force you to stay." At this time, General Liu ran in and said with a smile, "How is it? Miss Shen is leaving soon? I also want to ask Mrs. Shang to accompany Miss Shen to the theater." Feng Shi said softly that she did not dare to be what General Liu wanted. "Please, change the date and I will definitely accompany you." General Liu said, "Okay, that's it. Let my car take Miss Shen back." Yakin smiled and said, "I know General Liu will not be able to live with it if he doesn't do a little favor." "Then sister, you can take General Liu's car." Feng Shi just said whatever and they sent Feng Shi there outside the gate, under the electric light. I watched her get into the car and then go in. When Feng Shi arrived home, she just knocked on the door and was greeted by Aunt Shen and Shen Sangshuan. When Shen Sangshuan saw her smiling, he couldn't help but laugh too. Feng Shi walked back to the room and said, "Mom, come on, come on." As soon as Aunt Shen entered the room, she saw that Feng Shi had not changed her clothes yet. She put her back against the window and kept digging around her body. A lot of banknotes were placed on the bed. Looking at the words on the wife's name, they were all 10 yuan and 5 yuan. I couldn't help but exclaimed, "Oh, where are you?" When he said the word Li, he quickly raised his right hand. He covered his mouth, then stretched his head to look at the banknotes, and then at Feng Shi's face. She smiled low and said, "Sure enough, where did you get all this money?" Feng Shi told in detail what happened today in a low voice, because she smiled and said, "I earned so much money in a day. It's only this time in my life, but I don't really care about them losing money. That General Liu even asked me to go to the theater." When he said this, his voice became louder. Aunt Shen said, "Don't agree to this carelessly. It would be inconvenient for a big girl to go to the theater with a man and let the man named Fan know about it." Before the sentence was finished, Shen Sangshuan was heard saying outside the window, "Sister-in-law, what's the matter with you? This General Liu is the brother of Marshal Liu, so he has great power." Aunt Shen and Feng Shi were frightened at the same time. "Jump." Aunt Shen looked outside the room and ran towards the door. Feng Shi stuffed the banknotes on the bed under the quilt. Shen Sangshuan walked to the outside room and said to Aunt Shen, "Sister-in-law, I just heard in the yard that General Liu wanted to invite the eldest daughter to a play. This is rare. The face given by him is huge. Why can't we go? Since he is a friend of Mrs. Monk, we can be considered friends." Aunt Shen quickly stopped and said, "What's wrong with you? I want you to talk for a while." Shen Sangshuan said. When he was about to say it, he took a breath and smiled and endured it. Although he didn't say anything, he walked back to his room, feeling secretly happy in his heart. At that moment, Aunt Shen pretended to go to sleep, so she went to close the door of the north room early, and then came to Feng Xi's room and counted the banknotes 5 times, totaling 720 yuan. Aunt Shen sat on the bed together, held Feng Xi's hand, smiled and whispered, "My child, our luck is not bad this year. With the money left by Uncle Fan, it will be thousands. If you want, according to the method of loan sharking, after half a year of anniversary, we can live half a lifetime." Feng Shi couldn't help but smile after hearing this. "When it's time to go to sleep, I can't stop thinking about how to spend the money on my pillow. If I keep it at home, there is too much money, and I am afraid that something will happen if I want to deposit it in a bank. I have never experienced it before, and I don't know what the procedure is. If I follow my mother's advice and put usury money, it is better to keep it at home. I also borrowed usury money. I borrowed 30 yuans from someone, which was used as 100 copper coins. I repaid the principal and interest 10 coins every 3 days. I paid it off into months, which was a full double. My mother paid back the money once secretly. Just curse him once, and always say that he will die if he eats it, and he gives up the usury money. Isn't he cursed in the same way? After thinking about it for most of the night, I still couldn't come up with a solution. With this much money, I didn't get any benefits, but I didn't sleep well for most of the night. The next morning, when I woke up, I quickly took the key to open the small box. I was relieved when I saw the whole roll of banknotes stuffed in the corner of the box. Aunt Shen stepped into the room, opened her mouth, and asked softly, "What are you doing?" Feng Shi smiled and said, "I had a nightmare." After saying that, she moved her hand towards Shen Sangxuan's room. He pointed out, "I dreamed that the man snatched the money away, and he and I snatched it away, sweating all over. You touch my spine." Aunt Shen smiled and said, "I also had a dream all night. Forget it. It would be really troublesome if the drunkard found out about it." The mother and daughter were so wary of Shen Sangxuan, but Shen Sangxuan went out as soon as he got up early, and he didn't come home until half a day later. As soon as he saw Feng Shi, he cupped his hands and said, "Congratulations on making a small fortune. I advise you to go. There is nothing wrong with this." He asked, "What kind of fortune have I made? Do I have enough money to drop from the sky?" Shen Sangxuan said with a smile, "Although I can't drop the money from the sky, it's still very cheap anyway. You won hundreds of dollars playing cards at Shang's house last night. Doesn't that count as making a small fortune? Anyway, I don't want to share a penny with you, so why are you hiding it from me? I just went to Shanggongguan and met Adjutant Huang. He told me everything. Will he still lie? He said that Mrs. Shang has reserved a large box at the first stage tonight and wants to invite you to the theater. Let me say something first. When I come back, I will probably send a car to pick you up soon." Feng Xian said, "I won a little money by winning, but I borrowed 200 or 300 yuan from Sister Yakin, and I haven't paid her back yet." Shen Sangxuan waved his hands repeatedly and said, "I can't control this. I'm asking you whether you want to listen to the opera or not." Feng Shi hesitated for a while, but did not agree. Seeing Aunt Shen in her room, she retreated to the room and asked her, "Mom, do you want me to go or not? If I go, there must be Master Shang, General Liu, who is with me. But it's a bit inconvenient. Besides, it's late at night and I can't come back until late at night. If I don't go, Yakin will treat me really well. Besides, they reserved a room for me today, so I feel embarrassed to have to lose face." She frowned deeply as she said this. Aunt Shen said, "It doesn't matter. What are you doing with your eyebrows knotted with worry? Just take their car and go to the theater, watch a play or two, and come back early." Shen San, when Zuan heard this in the room outside, he clapped his hands and jumped up and said, "It's over. Mrs. Shang is with us. The original car is coming and the original car is going. It doesn't matter." She put on her jewelry and changed her clothes. "Just wait. It'll be easy to leave as soon as the car comes." Although Feng Shi felt that his words were a bit flattering, she had to modify them if she really wanted to sit in the box and listen to the show. "So I put on some powder and put on an English green silk flag shirt that I thought I was most proud of. Because when Jiashu was in Beijing, she said she was already pretty enough, so she would rather wear something lighter, and as a female student, she shouldn't dress too gorgeously. Therefore, among Feng Shi's many new clothes, this one is of the highest quality." Feng Shi changed her clothes, just as the car sent by Master Shang to pick up the guests had just arrived. The guard guarding the car was already familiar with it. He knocked on the door and came in. He shouted in the yard, "Mrs. Shen, our wife sent a car to pick up the young lady. Someone called my wife." When I heard this call in the house, my wife immediately laughed and said, "Okay, please wait a moment." The two guards agreed with a yes. Aunt Shen then smiled and said to Feng Shi, "I'm so polite, just go." Feng Shi smiled and went out. Aunt Shen originally wanted to send her away, but then she thought about it, and the guard called me Mrs. Don't look down on yourself too much. How can a wife come to the gate and close it at night? So she just yelled from inside the house, "Come back early." Feng Shi was so happy that she kept getting into the car and ignored her words. The car drove all the way to the door of the first stage, where two other guards stood waiting. As soon as he saw Feng Shi getting off the car, he stepped forward and called Miss to lead the way. There were 7 or 8 gatekeepers and ticket takers in the theater next to the second gate. Seeing that there were 4 people hanging box cannons in front and behind Feng Shi, they all took a step back, stepped aside, and bowed together. 2 other people said, "Miss, are you here?" Feng Shi was afraid that they would see that it was not the real lady, so she puffed out her chest and ignored them, and then walked in. When we got to the box, it turned out to be Mr. Shang and his wife, and General Liu. This is a large box with a row of chairs in front that can seat for people. As soon as Feng Shi came in, they all stood up and offered their seats. At first glance, I saw General Liu sitting at the north end. There was an empty chair next to him in the middle. It was obvious that this was an empty seat. She was not supposed to sit down, but the next chair was occupied by Yakin. She had already turned her body to one side, moved the empty chair, and said with a smile, "Let's sit and talk together." Although Feng Shi saw it, there were 4 chairs behind him, and a maid and 2 maids were standing there. He could not keep company with them, so he had to sit down with a smile on his face. As soon as he sat down, General Liu poured a cup of tea, passed his hands to the railing in front of her, and called out, "Miss Shen, drink tea," with a smile, then took the melon seeds, peanuts, sugar, tangerine peel, plums on the plate, fruits, etc., can't help but grab and deliver them in front of you. Feng Shi could only say "You're welcome," but there was no way to stop him. At this time, a piece of 3/5 was being performed on the stage. An old man with a gray beard sat dumbly listening to it, and a female actor in palace clothes sang slowly, which did not arouse the interest of the audience at all. Therefore, in the theater, there was only a rumbling sound of mosquitoes. At first, a few people talked, and then no one could hear the opera, so everyone just talked. General Liu also talked to Feng Shi and asked her which school she was in and what kind of homework she had in the school. From school, it is rare to ask questions at home. General Liu heard her say that she only had one uncle who stayed at home, so he asked, what did he do in the past? Feng Shi wanted to explain, but she was afraid that others would look down on her, so she blushed and just said, "It's business." General Liu. So he laughed. Feng Shi felt more and more embarrassed here, so she turned back to talk to Yakin. I saw a string of beads hanging around her neck. On the snow-green silk shirt, it hung down to her chest, but it matched clearly. She asked with a smile, "How much did you buy these beads?" When she asked, she felt in her heart. I also thought that I had seen people buying them in foreign goods stores for just a few cents. Although hers is good, it probably only costs 1 or 2 yuan. I was thinking about it in my mind, but I didn't dare to ask. Unexpectedly, Yakin replied, "This is true. The beads are not very big. They cost 1,200 yuans. Feng Shi felt her heart skip a beat and asked again, "How much is it?" "It's only worth 800 or 900 yuan. Feng Shi held the bead ring with her hand, lowered her head as if appreciating it, and said with a smile, "It's worth it. Some time ago I saw a pair that was not as good as this one, and it was sold for such a price." Only at this moment, Feng Shi simply looked at the clothes Yakin was wearing. She felt that the material was thin and bright, but she didn't know what to call it. Looking at the material again, it was all embroidered with white silk thread. There are white cranes in different shapes, but the cuffs and the hem of the skirt are embroidered with waves and algae, all made of green and white silk threads. This is a greener piece of used silk than mine. The flag shirt was the same, elegant, but on my side, it seemed drab and shabby. I didn't know how much the material was worth, so I didn't want to make others laugh by asking. When he went to watch the opera, he asked what the opera meant and what the words were. Yakin looked at General Liu, pursed her lips, and said with a smile, "What? You ask him. He is an old theater fan and can understand 9 out of 10 plays." Feng Shi felt that it was a bit inconvenient to talk to this person since General Liu played a card to make peace yesterday. But people are always polite. How can you ignore it? He talked incessantly, and Feng Shi could only smile a little, and agreed to a simple sentence for a while. Everyone was enjoying the play when Master Shang suddenly frowned a few times and said, "The air in this theater is so bad, I'm so dizzy." When Yakin heard that, she turned around quickly and persisted. Master Shang held his hand and said softly, "Today's show is not very good. Otherwise, let's go back first." Master Shang said, "That's a bit wrong." General Liu said repeatedly, "It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Miss Shen wants to go home later. I can take her back in the car." Feng Shi heard that she was very reluctant. "But I couldn't keep the sick person from going home. Even if I wanted to go back, I would feel a little at odds with him." I just stood up, hesitating, and couldn't explain why. While she was hesitating, Yakin had already walked out of the box, yelled "I'm sorry" twice and said "I'll see you another day," so she and Master Shang left. Feng Shi was only watching the show with General Liu here. The maid behind the chair had already gone back with Yakin. Although Feng Shi's eyes were injected on the stage at this time, it was impossible to tell what the plot of the play on the stage was. There was a fan right next to the box where I was sitting, and it was blowing very cool. But my body felt hot from my heart, and it penetrated my spine, as if I was sweating out. There was something in my stomach that I wanted to say goodbye and go home. I wanted to tell General Liu several times, but it always felt sudden, and I was afraid that others would be offended. General Liu is always considerate. Sitting in the same box with others and watching a play for a while is nothing. Isn't this a bit of face? So sitting here, even though I feel uneasy and can't say that sentence, I still sit here. General Liu poured her a cup of tea, and she smiled and bowed. General Liu took this opportunity to look at her face and said, "Miss Shen, today's show is not very good. There is a good show here this Saturday. I invite Miss Shen to come and listen to it again. Are you willing to reward me?" Feng Shi hearing that, he paused and said with a smile, "Thank you. I'm afraid I don't have enough time." General Liu smiled and said, "It's summer vacation now, and I won't have no time. Just don't want to be rewarded. I don't want to be rewarded. I don't dare to force it." Just now, Miss Shen looked at Mrs. Shang's bead necklace and seemed to like it very much. "I have one at home, which may be better than Mrs. Shang's. I want to give it to Miss Shen. I don't know. Miss Shen, are you willing to accept it?" Feng Shi's dimples twitched and said with a smile, "How dare you accept it?" General Liu said, "As long as you are willing to accept it, I will send it to you in Daxi Hutong." "What's the house number?" Feng Shi said, "The house number is 5. But the general shouldn't take it as a gift," he said, and laughed again. From here on, the two simply started talking and forgot about the drama on the stage. As he spoke, the play was over before he knew it. General Liu smiled and said, "Miss Shen, let me take you back. It's late at night, and it's not easy to hire a car." Feng Shi only said "You're welcome" but did not refuse. General Liu walked out of the theater with her. General Liu's car was guarded by guards and parked at the entrance of the theater. When he was about to get into the car, General Liu gave Feng Shi a hand and got into the car together. After getting on the car, General Liu told the guards standing beside the car not to follow the car and walked back on his own. He casually turned off the dry cell light embedded in the roof of the car. The car went very fast, and within 10 minutes, Feng Shi had arrived at the door of her house. General Liu turned on the light, and the driver jumped out of the car and opened the door. When Feng Shi got out of the car, General Liu said, "Goodbye bye." Feng Shi didn't say anything and went to knock on the door. The doorbell only rang, and Aunt Shen repeatedly agreed and came out to open the door. On the other hand, he asked, "Is it the car in front that took you back? Should I ask you to come back early, or should you wait until the show is over? It's past 1 o'clock. I've really waited long enough." Feng Shi lowered her head and walked back to the room quietly and silently. Seeing her like this, Aunt Shen hurriedly followed her into the room. Seeing that her face was red and her hair hanging down from her forehead was a little fluffy, she asked softly, said, "Child, what's wrong?" Feng Shi forced a smile and said, "It's not that good." "Why do you ask this?" Aunt Shen said, "Maybe you are suffering from heat? Look at how uncomfortable you look." Feng Shi said, "No." Aunt Shen felt that Mrs. Shang's invitation to listen to the play would not cause any trouble, so she didn't ask. Here Feng Shi slowly changed her clothes and shoes, then took out another roll of banknotes from her pocket, counted a few, and found that they were 30 10-yuan bills. I thought, should I tell my mother about this money? When he was in the car, he grabbed my hand and put the banknotes into my hand, and said, "Take these 300 yuan to pay off Mrs. Shang's gambling capital." I just shouldn't have accepted it from him. So he underestimated me. Just say, "Miss Shen, do you think I don't know your history? You are doing the same thing as Mrs. Shang before." He can say this, so he has no scruples. Thinking of this, he sat blankly on the small iron bed, holding the roll of banknotes in his left hand, while his right hand stretched out his index and middle fingers to touch his lips. Thinking of this, I got up and closed the door and sat down again, thinking that he said he would give me a beaded hoop tomorrow. If it were Zhao Yakin, it would be worth more than 1,000 yuan. What does it mean for a new person to give me such a heavy gift? According to what he repeatedly said, his wife was dead, so what did he think about me? Thinking of this, I couldn't help but think deeply. Feng Shi put a hand on her face and turned her head when she saw the bust of the family tree hanging on the wall, smiling towards her. I don't know why, but I suddenly shivered, and then I broke out in a cold sweat, and I didn't dare to look. So he quickly moved the pillow away and stuffed the roll of banknotes under the quilt. Just this time, I saw several letters from Jiashu. I took the envelopes in my hand and took out the letters one by one and looked at them. What the letter said, such as, "After we say goodbye, I will think of you when I see a girl of 16 or 17 years old. If we tell my mother slowly about our affairs, we may hope to succeed. I never lied to my mother for you. You lied a lot, and I said you were a poor student, and my mother really approved of this kind of person. We can go all the way openly when we return to Beijing. My mother is completely fine, and I can't wait to fly back to Beijing because of our future. The future will be brighter and brighter. I want to come back and live this bright life of love. Our love is not based on money, and I will never dare to insult you with these stinky money. I would like to help you become independent and not be oppressed by money like before." When others read these words, they may think they are ordinary, but when Feng Shi read them, he felt that every word had penetrated into his heart. After reading the letter, I suddenly looked up at the portrait of Jiashu and felt that he was calm and had a comforting smile. He said he would never insult me with money, but he was willing to help me stand on my own feet and not be oppressed by money. This is true. Otherwise, why would he bother sending me to a vocational school? When we were singing Dagushu at Jonington, he came up and gave me $1. He never thought of getting to know me that day. He was just helping me. We weren't looking for him. Of course, he was still singing under the bell tower today. Now that I have used his money to cultivate myself into a young lady, I will soon do things that I can't do to him behind his back. So, does that make sense in my conscience? General Liu is so old and rude. How can he be as gentle as Fan? Although Liu can spend money, it doesn't matter if I don't use his money. Although Fan didn't spend his money as generously as he did, without his money, he would have become a beggar. Thinking about it and looking at the family tree again, I felt even more uneasy. Yes, from now on, I won't have any contact with Yakin. So I took off my clothes, turned off the light, and went to sleep. As soon as Feng Shi leaned against the pillow, she thought of the sum of money under the pillow. I also thought about the string of beads promised by General Liu, the clothes Yakin was wearing, and the prosperity of Master Shang's home. If I were the wife of a general, the comfort would probably be even better than Yakin's. General Liu took some actions, even if they were a little too rough, but they were all out of love for me. Which man is not like this? If I ask him for 18,000, it will definitely be no problem, and he will comply. I am 17 years old, and I am not too old after being with him for 10 years. How much money can I make from him in 10 years? I have been a god of wealth my whole life. Thinking of this, Western-style buildings, cars, jewelry, flowery furnishings, and groups of servants all passed before my eyes one by one. These things are not phantoms. As long as you say I will marry you to General Liu, they will all come together. In this world, many people cannot hope for these pleasant things. Why don't they want it when they can easily get it? Even though he spent the money from someone named Fan, in terms of how he treated the person named Fan, he was not unbearable. To take a step back, even if I spent a few of his money in vain, I will be able to make a fortune and return the principal and interest together, so I can be worthy of him. When I think about it this way, it makes sense. So cars, bungalows, and jewelry all appeared before our eyes one after another. Feng Shi only felt that rich and powerful people were coming, and didn't know how to deal with it. It was as if she was already a noble lady, and she was busy taking care of these jewelry properties, but she forgot to sleep on the bed. Just when she was so fascinated, a sound suddenly came from the sky, waking her up from her dream, as if the family tree was smiling in front of her. If you want to know what kind of sound this is, I will explain it next time. Alright, this part of the story ends here.
Want to know what happened next? Let's listen to the breakdown next time.